All right, so vanity, vanity, all is vanity. So that's how we begin, or at least that's the second verse, right? And I thought before we launched into the big picture, which is, of course, my lecture style, I'd start in with just that little minutia piece, because it really gives way to my big picture style of that overview. And that vanity, vanity, all is vanity. If Ecclesiastes or Kohelet, so have you heard it called Kohelet? Okay, so Kohelet is perhaps the author of this text, or if you're studying it with a rabbi, you'll hear it called Kohelet. You will sometimes see this as written by Solomon. No, but okay. So in the same ways we would attribute things to King David, this is attributed to Solomon, but there are texts. So Kohelet, the author, and we have this attributed to. So this person, or this will be the text as it is called for those who are studying in Hebrew or with the rabbis and with some of the most ancient texts. So if you hear me use that word, this is what I'm referring to, all right? And when you hear it given credit to Solomon, this is blessing. This is it's not supposed to be dismissive or something. Oh, Solomon didn't write that. You'd give credit. That's an honorary thing. But those who study, Solomon didn't write this. Okay, so the best guess we have attribute it to this Kohelet, whoever this may be. Okay? Now, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. And we're going to take a look at this refrain, because if there were a refrain, if we were to chant this or sing this 38 times in, is this correct? I will look that up very quickly here. So it's either 38 times in Ecclesiastes, 35 times in the rest of Hebrew scripture, or vice versa. So since there are only 12 chapters in Ecclesiastes, it's a powerful amount that we see this word translated. And the word we are translating is havel. Okay? This word, let's start with vanity, because most of you have this translated as vanity in your text. No, what do you have?
Meaningless.
Meaningless. And I should translate that as an E. Havel. That should be H-E-V-E-L. Sorry. H-E-V-E-L. So I'll correct that in a moment. So you have meaningless. Meaningless, meaningless. All is meaningless?
Everything is meaningless.
Okay.
Wisdom is meaningless.
Excellent. Love that that's a different translation. You've got meaningless?
Yep.
Great. You've got meaningless. Okay. Wonderful. So we already have some insight that this is, the rest of you have vanity?
No, I have meaningless.
You have meaningless? So vanity, meaningless, vanity, meaningless. All right, different ways to entering into this, which is beautiful, because that's part of what I want to do here. Because when you think of vanity, what is vanity?
Senseless, nothingness.
Senseless, meaningless, okay. Another translation, or another way for entering in, if you say the word havel, so even just whisper it, havel, you feel it coming out of your mouth, right? It's breath, okay? And in Hebrew, several words, of course, for breath, right? but we have, you've heard us use the word ruach, right? So the very beginning in creation, we have ruach, God breathed, right? And then nashaim, pretty sure it's nashaim, I'll look up that too. So we have, so for these words, havel, ruach, nashim, ruach and nashaim, so you have God's breath, and then the breath, that spirit, that soul for human breath. But Havel doesn't have that positive connotation that we would have. Havel, it's got a different kind of connotation, futility. All right? It's a vapor, or think of it as like morning dew. Okay? So, vanity, meaningless, mist. So our author is saying this. All of life is this. All right? However, I don't think of that as a negative connotation per se, because is morning dew meaningless? No. All right? But still, it's not permanent. So there is something temporary in what the writer is trying to get across. And there is a creation of a story that is being told in this wisdom literature. And this will come out more fully, but the fact that Kohelet is telling us something, if you get the nuance of the language, and it's important, because if you know Havel, you understand it, and you understand that really the genesis of an idea, and here's the pun, you have in the creation story and this breath, and this is why I'm talking about ruach, the breath of life, and this other breath. Adam and Eve had two sons, and one of them, Havel, Cain, the elder, and Havel, the younger. We know 7 sentences about him. His life was but a breath. But we know God loved him. But his life was snuffed out. Okay? So understanding that piece will take us into some other pieces, because this piece of wisdom literature, in many ways, in these 12 chapters, takes on Torah. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So, some things that it might be important to know. All right? Since Friday is the 29th of September, it is the first day of the festival of Sukkot. Sukkot, festival of Tabernacle, festival of the booths. So for our Jewish brothers and sisters, here's why this is important. Ecclesiastes is always read for the festival of the booths at Sukkot. So I was able to find all kinds of fun stuff because it's right here and it's about to happen. So from the 29th to the 6th. So do you have any Jewish friends who actually build a booth? then let me tell you some fun things. So, all right. The idea is once a year in the fall. So this is a harvest festival, but it commemorates the fact that in the fall, harvest, okay, but for 40 years, you had to build a shelter until you had permanence or the land, right? And there are some folks who will actually live out in their shelters. Now, not many, but you put it out and you every year build a shelter in your yard, front or backyard, totally up to you. Many synagogues will build this temporary shelter, and it's there as a reminder of the impermanence of things. The fact that there is able, havel, in all of us. We are all able, right? This is all of our stories. We are all impermanent. But it also is, you bring in the harvest. So some folks will gather things in, you collect food for others, but you remember. And every year you remember. And for our Jewish brothers and sisters, they've just been through Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So that time of very intensely looking inward, this is now a celebration time. And so reading Ecclesiastes in this celebration time is important because you've seen the words in Ecclesiastes in terms of how you celebrate and that this is what you have and it's important. So we can talk about that and I'll raise that. But it is something where you have a both and moment. So all of life is temporary. So you might as well eat, drink, and be merry. Right? Woo! Go for it. But all right, so the rabbis had some ways to interpret this that I think might be helpful. So, right, just understanding when it was written, right? 300 to 200 BCE, just important information. And as I turn, so rather than trying to view the text as this philosophy, view the text, since it's written by one person, with a few editor's notes in there, right? Understand that this is one person searching for absolutes in a world that's filled with doubt and contradiction. Okay? So if you come into the text reading it that way, it's helpful to understand the text that way. So if you're searching for absolutes, these are the questions you may be asking. So if we see the text this way, then you see a pattern of growth as Kohelet, right, is developing. And you see that there is a quest that he is having, and it's not an encounter of a system of thought, but rather this man is asking questions and not so much answering them, but asking them. And in wisdom literature, he is then inviting you, the reader, to do the same thing. Are you raising and asking good questions as you encounter life? So, at the beginning stage, we see some things in terms of, everything he's yearning for, everything is there, I have these things, but I'm still searching for satisfaction. Then he's aging, and he's kind of this wandering observer. And then finally, drawing toward the end of life, he has these concluding remarks and some recommendations and says, seek enjoyment. Right? So, but as I said, it is important to understand that piece about Havel, and again, Hevel, sorry about that, to understand that there is this interesting juxtaposition with this wisdom literature and Torah, right? Because Rabbi Shapiro even goes so far as to say that Ecclesiastes is the anti-Torah. So I don't know if I would say that, but he's a rabbi, I'm not going to argue, I'm going to just listen. And that is that Ecclesiastes is very clear, or Kohelet, sorry, that life is fluid and it is in flux, and it is permanent. And if impermanent, sorry about that. And that if you go into vanity, vanity, all is vanity. The Torah, however, would stand and say that there is absolute certainty, and that absolute certainty is to be found in God. Ecclesiastes does not say that. Ecclesiastes says that, right, these things are, you can question all of this. It's all fluid, it's all in flux. And much like Job, if you follow the rules, oh well, right? It doesn't matter, because it's uncertain anyway. And so what good is it? Whereas if you read like Deuteronomy 8, if you do exactly this, then you're good to go. Well, really? Job did all of that, and so the world in which we live in doesn't look a lot like Deuteronomy 8 or Deuteronomy 11, right? There is a lot of chaos. So our certainty is not so much in following those particular rules, it's rather in understanding something quite different. So God might be an absolute certain, but following rules might not be the thing we want to rest ourselves on. It's in understanding something more about the relationship we have with God, right? And that's what Colette is talking about here. So we can ask these questions. So there's not a playbook we follow, but there's something deeper in understanding relational things. And Colette points to that in terms of, right, so if you have friends, right, if you fall down, a friend can pick you up, right? So Colette's pointing to that sort of thing, and that's an important thing to know. So I probably have been talking a really long time here. So the one last thing I want to put out here is, for me personally, as a dog owner, dog lover, in the creation narrative, there's very clearly this hierarchy that humans are superior and we have charge. But in Ecclesiastes 3:19, Colette says that animals have the soul too, right? And we all end in the same place. And so there's a direct challenge to that hierarchy. And so there are things that are set forth in Genesis or in Deuteronomy that Ecclesiastes sets out and says, my experience has been, and let me counter that. And it's a wonderful question-raising piece of literature that is in here. So we have Job and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes as these books that come in as wisdom lit that don't have a particular other kind of agenda. They're here on their own level to say different things. And I'm seeing people fall asleep, so it's my turn to hush my mouth now and to say, all right, folks, what do you bring to the table? And is there anything that I mentioned that you want to come back to? Or what did you find? What did you see? Or maybe the last piece I'll throw in is the latest thing the rabbi is not latest thing. One of the things I read that fascinated me is the second to the last sentence in Ecclesiastes. So when Rabbi Shapiro was asked about the inclusion of Ecclesiastes because it stands so diametrically opposed to all of the other things in the Torah, so why the heck is this book here? His answer was because this sentence was added, was not originally in the text, but an editor added this text. The end of the matter all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for that's the whole duty of everyone. Not part of the original text, but was added. So He did not comment on whether verse 14 was also added or not, the one that says, "For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil." But verse 13 was added. So, and that places it right in there. So, now for me, much like these things we get into when we talk about the Gospels in terms of, so did Jesus say that? Did Jesus not say that? In the end, it's part of our scripture. And so if it's part of our scripture, we have to deal with it. So whether it was written in, 352 by the original author, or whether it was written in 425 by a different author, it matters not to me. It's been in scripture for millennia. Let's deal with it because it's part of our sacred text. So there we go. I put that there. And what do you bring to the table? What questions? What comments? What cries of shock, outrage, or horror? What anything? Yes. What do we have? I should not put my Bible down because you're probably going to ask me questions about it.
Well, in chapter 3, the time for everything,
Oh, yes.
when it gets down here, it says that he has everything beautiful in his time. He also has said, he says, "I know that there is nothing better for men than to be happy and do good while they live."
Uh-huh.
That's the brightest part of the whole thing. Everything you're just not going to be happy no matter what happens to you or what's going on in life. It's just all over and done.
Uh-huh.
And I get a lot of happiness out of helping people. I've
Yes.
always felt like that.
Yes.
So I think when he says everything's meaningless, it's because he's not putting himself in it. He's just
Yeah.
looking for God, for whatever, and I want to help him.
Yeah.
Here,
Uh-huh.
if you just step out of your own little area and go to someone and see that, I bet you could find some meaning.
Yeah. Little depressor buddy. Yeah. Yeah.
But, I like that.
Yes. Yes. I concur. Yeah. It's the best part of the week. Thank you. Well summed up. Thank you. Yes. I told you I was going to have us begin with, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. It's the best way to start this class because it's as good as it's going to get. But, yep. Well, he did not resonate with you all. Okay.
I mean, it's hard to speak because I didn't finish. And
Oh,
because
that's
I hadn't
okay.
finished, I downloaded it, and I had to spend a lot of time in the car. And
Yeah.
I thought what I downloaded was going to be someone reading, but it was someone really commenting. It was like an hour on each.
Wow.
Oh, heavens.
So I had a hard time getting through. But one of the points he was making was
Yeah.
that there's a change in Kohelet
Yeah.
from being this meaningless to sort of learning the meaning by the end of the book, which
Yes.
seemed to make sense to me because in the beginning I felt like this was ugh,
Uh-huh.
but towards the end you start to feel much better about it.
Yes. Yes.
I read it as if he was journaling.
Ah.
And
Yeah.
he's just processing what these questions, life,
Mhm.
and that as his process of journaling was just had a nice little thread of it, because sometimes you could see the light in what he was saying, and then it would go back down into the kind of dumps again, but then there would find some new light. But I do think the book has a lot of wisdom. I was looking for some of the things that I had thought about when I was reading it, and I thought I better marked it, but I didn't. But one of them is from 7:29. It said, "See, this alone I found, that God made human beings straightforward, but they have devised many schemes." And I think in today's world of just communication, I frequently say to my children, you just have to tell it straight.
Yep.
If you don't tell it straight, it's going to get all kinds of different ways of being interpreted, and ways that you may never have dreamed of. But if we tell it straight, then everybody understands what page you're on, you know? And so that one just stands out at me because,
Yeah.
and it's hard to tell it straight sometimes. Well, I should say it's a little bit dangerous because
Oh, yeah.
people can be hurt if you're not careful, but we'd be, in the long run, we'd be so much better off, you know? And then, of course, Ecclesiastes 3
Yeah.
is, you know, was it Abba? Who
The
did
birds.
it? Who-
The birds.
The birds did it?
Yeah.
You know, made it famous, you
the
know,
song.
with the song. But that has a lot of merit too. It works at funerals and at weddings, both, this particular passage, you know, so.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I do see it as Kohelet's journal, you know, and he's giving us a little peek into what it's like to imagine life. And what's important? Well, not the things that we think are, you know.
The question life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can't read through without the song going through my head.
That's right.
Yeah,
Sing
yeah.
it.
I think he wanted to let us know that earthly things are just not worth putting our life into.
Mhm.
Just, you know, because it's worthless.
Yeah.
It's in the end, it's going to be gone.
Can't take it with you,
Can't
right?
take it with you.
Yeah.
Right. It's vapor, it's dew, it's mist.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's messy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And the part about, I remember thinking about this a lot too, the part about, you know, don't moan and groan, and just accept the gifts you have and enjoy them and be happy. And yeah, that was part of it too.
Yeah, and it's hard sometimes for Christians to do that. We get tangled up in the rules. Oh, I can't go have fun. God forbid that I have fun, you know.
Uh-huh.
But fun is a gift of God, you know, to
It is.
go out and play and enjoy that. I think that's another real gift of this book is, you know, enjoy life. Don't make it so hard. You don't really gain anything by making it so hard, you know.
Don't.
It's a heartache, maybe.
Yeah.
Headache.
That's pointless.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I see this author, I see his life pivot at different points. This time I saw the pivot around chapter 5, right? Guard your steps when you go into the house of God, to draw near, to listen is better than the sacrifice offered by fools. They don't know to keep from doing evil. Never be rash with your mouth, or let your heart be quick to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven and you're upon the earth. Therefore let your words be few. Right? And for me, I saw that. You see the transition start like in 3, right? For everything there is a season. And in 5, it's kind of that moment. Because usually, right, in youth, blah, 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 and then there is this moment in adulthood where you're kind of just like, hush, right? So listen. And so that's where I kind of heard that pivot, moving into a different stage in life. And so, yeah. I have read this as, you know, just one person's, but hearing both rabbis this time talk about really how it's one person's journal, and one of them has it divided into 2 sections, one of them has it divided into 3 sections. And so how do I see that transition go? And yeah, so now I'm monopolizing again. What else what did you see or hear, or what do you know Ecclesiastes for, perhaps, and did something surprise you other than just the down in the mouth, right? Know what? I'm happy. So, tone of the book.
Ecclesiastes 9 kind of resonated with me in that
Yeah.
it's a common destiny for everybody. So we read that the wicked are being punished, the righteous get all these benefits, and no, God's in control here, and everybody has common destiny.
Mm-hmm.
And afterward, they join the dead. There we go.
Yep.
Everybody goes to the dead.
It goes from having fun in your youth, just enjoy your life, because in the end, the grinders go, which is, and my book explained what the grinders are, the teeth, the everything goes.
Yes.
And I was like, your gray hair, no, you have gray hair, which is the almond tree that blossoms white. So it's like, okay. All right, and the animals drag like an older person. It's, it's just, what is it? Was it the snake or I don't remember what it was? It's in the and the dust. Let's see.
Well, I'm saying a living dog is better than a dead lion, and
Yes.
that's not it.
Yes.
But
And
yeah,
the
But it's all in
grasshopper
that-
drags himself
Yeah.
along,
yeah.
and desire no longer is stirred.
Yeah.
It's all there. The man goes to his eternal home.
Mhm.
Mourners go about the streets. So
Yeah.
it's but then it ends with, keep the commandments.
Yeah.
So even though everything seems to be meaningless, but
Mhm.
if we follow
it
God's
anyway.
laws,
Yep.
there will be triumph in the end.
Mhm.
He has a lot to say about, not a lot, but he has stuff to say about death, and that life is better than death. And I that kind of like, I think, we don't know what's beyond. So death why is that a bad thing?
That's a good thought. When I was reading that, I was not thinking of, I don't know where it is now, but I didn't think about physical death. I thought he was, in his depressed places, you are essentially dead person walking, right? You have no meaning, no purpose, no thing. It's like you're dead. And I wondered if he was
Maybe
talking
he's
about
because there's in
that.
different places within
Yes.
that, and I'm thinking, what does he know about death that none of the rest of us know?
Yes.
And so, no, but you're right. If you act like you're dead, then
Yeah.
what's the point?
If you're so down,
Yeah, because it was better to be a dog, a live dog, than a dead lion.
Dead lion. Uh-huh.
Well, I got to say, I think dogs have it pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, the ones I know, they get treated pretty nice.
And dogs really seem to be so nice, and the owners are so, they just, I never used to see that. We used to be afraid if the person had a dog, the dog come out and get you. No,
They're everywhere now.
They're not. It's not like that. It's like they got a real connection with their animal, and they just, it's.
I wouldn't mind coming back as a dog. My dog.
As long as it's a correct, we need to kind of go back to the 200 BCE.
Maybe
We
you
have
go
a
that
whole
way,
different
too.
perspective on what a dog
good
is, but
point,
we'll.
yeah.
But I'm going to take your piece of understanding death and broken relationship or those sorts of things. That interpretation is a great way to go here, because there are other places in Ecclesiastes where Colette is certainly talking about the fact that it's better to be, or more honest, right, to be sitting Shiva or to be in that house of death than to be in a house of birth, or, right, so our translations into English don't always carry a full meaning, so using those interpretations of death not actually meaning a literal physical death, but these other things, I think that's a really that's a great way to go with that. So, yep. Another fun phrase. So wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one bungler destroys much good.
How true is that?
Isn't it? Not a proverb, but words from Ecclesiastes and
Yeah.
just downright honest. One bungler destroys much good. Yep.
Sure.
That's what I kind of liked about it. It was so honest.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, we all, when we're reading Proverbs, it's all wonderful, but we all in the back of our minds know that it isn't really true that if you do all these things, your life is going to be perfect.
Right.
So this sort of started out negative, but I felt like in the end, I felt good. I'm sorry, I didn't finish it, but where the part I got to, I felt good and hopeful and kind of liked it that it had laid it on the table.
That's exactly it. Colette's world is our world. So not necessarily the, well, yes, the depressing parts, because if we read the news, right? I mean, that, the uncertainties and the, I mean, those things that are there, we can all say, yeah, right? Sometimes the politically corrupt, sometimes they take power and things are unfair, and let's talk about what's fair. But okay, you know, this sort of this is real, and justice and righteousness and all of those things don't win the day every day. So
Pretty
good
easy
questions.
to lose hope. It's
Isn't
pretty
it?
easy to
Yeah.
lose hope and just look
Uh-huh.
around and say, what is it, you know, what's it all
Right.
about? Well,
Right.
why are we working so hard? You know, we're not getting anywhere. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, there was in chapter 3, where it says there was a man all alone and he had neither son nor brother, but he's toiling, and who is he leaving all this?
Yes.
He is never content.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like depriving himself of enjoyment and fun just to
Yeah.
accumulate,
Exactly.
worldly things. And
Yeah.
then he dies and he leaves it, hopefully he leaves it to charity. And that.
Yes.
To the dog.
He left it to the dog, not the dead lion. Oi. All right, that's going to become the class joke.
Yeah, for sure.
So what else? Anything else that we might have to share, or words from good old Kohelet that ring in our ears?
It says here, meaningless in Ecclesiastes and usually in scripture refers to the emptiness and final result of all life apart from God.
All right.
Apart from that.
Apart
that's-
from
I'll take that.
There's
Mhm.
the key, yeah. Yeah. And I believe he circled back to that as well.
Mhm.
The things we think matter don't,
Mhm.
but
Yep.
the most important thing is relationship, and primarily relationship with God.
Yep.
So this may not be appropriate for right now, but at some point,
Always. It's
I'd like to have a discussion on what is a personal relationship with God. And
Uh-huh.
I they'll probably take up a lot of time, but I would just like to discuss that at some
Mhm.
point.
Yes. So it's okay, I think, to start to go there now. If that makes us feel uncomfortable, because I know we're being filmed, then we don't have to do that. But I think that's a very wonderful conversation to have. And so very appropriate. So I think I would start by simply asking, do you mind sharing what you think that sounds like to you? Or maybe I'm just going to open that up, and then, because it's not my perspective. There's not one way to have a personal relationship with God, just like there's not one way to have a marriage, right? So the ways in which we engage in having personal relationships, vary person to person. And we understand that God made each individual person. And just as God made us individually, uniquely, and differently, then those aspects of us that differ one from the other are divinely different because they are created by God. And so the ways in which we will have that personal relationship, okay, all of those will be divinely inspired, divinely different, and divinely connected. So to have a personal, I can talk about what that looks like for me. Others will talk about what that looks like or feels like for them. Some of those may spark and say, that might, okay, but it's not to say, well, if I don't have that, then I'm doing it wrong. That's not so, right?
Well, I think in part of the quest, or the desire, the work to have this personal relationship with God, you question, is what I have, is that it? Is there more? It's, what is it?
Okay, all right. Then that may be more than we really want to do on camera, but I would say if you are asking, is there more, then perhaps there's more. Because asking the question in and of itself means you're looking to deepen the relationship you have, which is blessing. And when you are seeking to deepen a relationship with God, there is a well at your disposal, because God is that deep, deep well. And so exploring that depth, plumbing the depths of what you can explore in a relationship, and knowing God, right? That the unknowable, well, you just begin to dive in. And so it sounds as if there is some, now I'm mixing a metaphor, there is some thirst, and so it's time to begin to drink deeply. But now we're back at a well, so not much of a mixed metaphor, so it worked. I worked it with its way back. So does that help?
A little.
A little, okay. Then we need some deeper conversation. Is there anyone else who wants to jump in at this?
I
Please.
would say so. I
Please.
agree completely. I think it looks different to each individual. I think it's a very, which is why we use the word personal,
Yes.
maybe. I do think it's very, very personalized. When I first started to get hungry for God, I actually just said, I am hungry for you. I want to understand you. You know, help me understand you more. And that would be a frequent prayer. And so often I would go through the day and I would never even think about God. And I was frustrated about that. So I began to pray about that. I want to think of you first thing in the morning, you know. I want to think of you the last thing at night, you know. Help me to direct my mind toward that. And about the same time I was getting interested in Scripture. And that did help, you know, New Testament primarily, not where we are now. That was, that's later, you know. But But there were parts of Scripture that were very, very helpful to me. Curiously, the one that Pastor Michelle just talked about, the woman at the well, I've never understood when Jesus said, if you drink of this water, you'll never be thirsty again. Because my experience in my relationship with God is my thirst is never satisfied.
Yep.
I simply want more. I might reach a certain level and a certain understanding, and then, no, I'm still thirsty. You know, feed me, like the little birds do. When you know, it's just kind of a, and this has been going on with me for 40 years probably, you know. So, I mean, it's just a very, very long and slow process, and I guess in defense of our teacher here, maybe we never find out, but it's the quest, it's the seeking, it's the wanting to know more, which seems to, for me, make my relationship with this whatever spirit, God, whoever and I do have running conversations most of the day now, you know, which is really kind of nice, and it's this voice in me that might be saying, you might want to rethink that, you know, or something like that. So, and I did not have that in the beginning. Like I said, it was a very long process, but it has been a joy. I can say that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that helps or not, but that's my story.
Beautiful. Thank you for raising the question.
Yes.
Being open to that. Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? No, maybe not with Ecclesiastes, but truly anything else? Because what Ecclesiastes teaches us is the art is in the questioning and the questing. Or from the warmth in this room, maybe the art is in the taking of a nap.
I like that he says you need to find God when you're youth. Just because when you get old, you just things just aren't quite the same. That's a sad case. But I think there's a lot of truth to that. That when you're young, there's so much going on, and you have all this vibrant energy, and it's just a, yeah. I guess that's a good time to find, because that will carry you over to when you get older and you are slowed down, and you still can find pleasure in doing things and being close to God. So you need your youth to train you to get ready, just like you do for the races.
There you go. Yep.
Run those races.
Yep. It's amazing how the God of my youth has changed.
Oh boy.
And yeah. I want to know what that God's going to look like later on. So, yep.
I think we've planted our roots when we were younger, you know, and now that we are older and we have more time to think and to sit and to read, that's when things will develop more and we'll have the aha moments.
Yes.
Mhm.
Why you have many older people that come to church instead of all these young people.
Yeah.
More open space, hey, for the little aha to get in there. We're not so cluttered up with all the things that go on with.
And need to be done.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yep.
Pebble.
Yes.
There's something in here too about
Absolutely.
getting God and getting rid of anxiety. Anxiety takes up so much of our time.
Yes, it does.
It clouds us up
Really
with it.
does.
We can't
It
move
does.
on to other things.
It does, and you can't just shake it out.
Yeah.
Would that we could.
Oh boy, indeed.
Yep.